Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of SASA Archeo Gaming Live, featuring SASA gamers Dr. Kate Minetti, Alexander Vanderwally, David Serrano Lorenz, and Julie Levy, and featuring special guests each week. What is SASA? SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. We work to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper past, building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship. We work towards our goal of inspiring a wide, inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. SASA does this through many different projects. We do Archeo Gaming live streams every week. We also have book clubs and partnership streams featuring other ancient studies organizations. We also have an access database with over 1,300 websites, a searchable database of ancient studies resources, ancient studies vocabulary lists on archaeological terms, and we do research on the downward trend and much more. So please check us out. Where can you find SASA? You can search Save Ancient Studies Alliance on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or X, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Please make sure to follow and subscribe. It really does make a big difference for us. Some protocol for this live event. Please be kind and respectful. Listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. We'd love to hear from you in the chat box. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. And these Archeo Gaming live streams are on Twitch, and recordings will be posted on our YouTube channel after the event. And there are definitely spoiler alerts. Last but not least, if you enjoy what you see from SASA, such as our Archeo Gaming book clubs and reading groups, please consider becoming a supporter of SASA with a recurring donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us to save ancient studies. You can also subscribe to our Twitch channel for free through your Amazon Prime account. We have information on how to do that on our website. And thank you very much all for joining us. Have fun.
Done. So we should be visible. We should be audible. Let me check if everybody could say something. I'll check if we're audible.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, we are audible.
All good.
Sounds good. Yeah.
We are
Excellent.
audible. Great. This is the quickest we've ever got a stream to work. Wow, look at that.
Seriously.
And we
That
already
was smooth.
Yeah, wow, look at this. We already have
Wow.
a first-time chat from Fub Archaeologist. Hi, thank you for joining us.
I know that person.
Okay, great. So, hi everyone, thank you for being here. Today we're taking a break from Hellblade, which we streamed the past 2 weeks, and we're kicking off our new series, our series of specials called Archaeomechanics, where we're looking at games not explicitly historical or archaeological or mythological or anything for that matter, but games with world building that is somehow draws on features and aspects of archaeology that we can deconstruct in that way. And so I'm joined by David and two wonderful guests, Marco Caracciolo and Bill Farley. Marco is a colleague and a friend of mine who literally wrote a book on this game. I'll put a link to it in the chat. It's called On Souls Ring Worlds. And Bill, you might remember from our streams already 2 years ago, I think, Uncharted 4, we played with him, and we also talked about questions of heritage of archaeology, about questionable looting and shooting mechanics in contemporary games. So yeah, I mean, did I forget anything? Did I introduce you to correctly, or if there's anything else you want to add, please go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I just want to thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure. I'm a bit nervous about the fact that I'll be playing Elden Ring in front of an audience, but it's great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's exciting to be back. We'll get to talk about ludonarrative dissonance today, I'm sure. Again, that's always you can't get through a stream without saying that at least 10 times.
Yes, yes. Maybe you can tell me what it is.
I
would
don't
love
know.
to know.
I don't think anybody knows. I think we just say it because it sounds cool, right?
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So Marco is the one playing the game right now. So it's not me or David who usually play because that would not. If I had played this, we would be stopping in 10 minutes because I cannot handle this. But Marco is an expert on this, and so he'll be
Sort of.
taking us through it. And I'll also put a link in the chat to Bill's YouTube channel, where he has discussed Elden Ring among other things, many other things, and which you should definitely check out.
Oh, yeah, I got videos about Elden Ring, about Dark Souls, all the Dark Souls, even Dark Souls 2, the best one. I actually haven't made a video about Dark Souls 2, but I did need to.
It is actually pretty good. I don't know why it has such a bad rep, but
that's the rest of the stream. We're just talking about Dark Souls 2 and why it's the best one. Let's go.
Surprise.
Someone in the chat is saying that Bill is a Bob Ross of archaeologists.
Yeah.
This is because of my secret alter identity as a mediocre watercolorist. That's probably that's all.
Must be that.
All right, so
okay.
Yeah, Marco, take us through the world of. So I've played this for half an hour, and David said he hasn't played it. So what is the game about? What can you tell us about FromSoft games as we go through it?
What is the game about? That's a big question. As someone who has sort of written a book on Elden Ring and Dark Souls, I'm not really sure I know the plot in any detail. Which is, I think, quite interesting in itself. But what I can say is that, so where I am right now is very close to the starting location. So obviously this is a high-level character, or fairly high-level character. So I'm not going to have too much of a hard time, I guess, making my way around this area. But this is sort of where the game starts. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, I mean, everyone knows that, but I'll say it anyway. The map is huge. There is also an underground area and plenty of ruins that pop up more or less everywhere. So this is, I think, the first church you come across when you start the game, and it's already fairly archaeological, let's say. What I'm interested, of course, is. I'm interested in the Japanese imagination of Christianity, which is something that seems to pervade this game and many other From Software games. I think it's a very strange and interesting filter through which we view a lot of references to Western fantasy, but also religion and things like that. Okay, so this is one thing. The other, I think, pretty interesting feature is that not only are there ruins like this one, but there's a bunch of fragments, more or less scattered throughout the lands between, which would be the world of this game. My understanding, but I'm unfortunately not a lore expert, maybe Bill or someone else can correct me. My understanding is that these are fragments of the Elden Ring. Is that correct? Is that possible?
We're talking about the grace here, the sort of save spot.
This one, for example. Right?
I consider myself fairly well part of the into the lore, and what the graces actually are is still a bit mysterious to me, which I think, like you were saying, is actually pretty interesting, is that you can get quite into the lore, watch all the videos, read all the Extra Life articles, and still have chunks of this game that are just kind of like, I don't know. I think you're right. I think they're, because the Elden Ring shatters sometimes in antiquity, right? And these are little bits of it. Yeah, that leads you to. They're supposed to lead you to Marika, who is the sort of god of this world, and who you're supposed to be going to become her Elden Lord. That's ostensibly the baseline plot.
So another feature that is fairly common in From Software games is, of course, the use of item descriptions to paint some of the background lore of the game. So maybe I'll show you a couple of examples. I'm not sure how do I do that. I've actually not played this for a very long time, so not sure how to bring up the item descriptions. Wait, let me find an interesting item first.
And remember to mute whenever I'm not talking so that I can use my very clacky keyboard to write back to people in the chat.
Yeah, the chatters are asking about the church, about if the arches are Romanesque or Gothic, if it maybe represents Hadrian's Wall in a bit.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
What I notice here, and what I've also talked with Marco as we tested this a couple of weeks ago, is that in order to create a fantasy setting like this, it relies on tropes of existing real world architectures and archaeology and art styles, but then reappropriates them or acculturates them into this new fantasy setting, which is at once recognizable, but in a different sense. At the same time, completely unfamiliar.
Right. I don't know if I could identify the style of this particular church, but what I can say is that elsewhere in the lands between, there are some pretty obvious references to medieval art history. So maybe I'll show you something actually here, which is a location I wanted to visit anyway. So this is, I think it's known as Farum Azula. And it's, the lore goes really deep here, but it's essentially some kind of location outside time. Can you still see the screen?
Yeah,
Everything okay?
Crumbling.
So here, the architecture here really reminds me of the, for example, the Campo dei Miracoli in Pisa. That sort of Italian Gothic style is, I think, very, very present here. This is, the Leaning Tower essentially. Look. So it's almost a reference. It's so clear that I don't know if we're supposed to. Yeah, I think we are supposed to recognize this as some kind of.
I think that the games, the FromSoft games, always borrow really heavily from real historical architecture.
Absolutely.
But they don't do it. They do it very thoughtfully. In that it tends to be that I think like architectural styles within the game come to stand for certain cultures or periods or whatever within the game. But not that do sometimes and sometimes don't match up kind of thematically with stories really about those real places. Like just because they've got sort of Roman architecture doesn't necessarily mean something is automatically going to scream empire or despotism. I don't know, I'm thinking like Fallout New Vegas, right? Like when they reference Roman stuff in there, it's very explicitly like a statement about our pop culture notions of what Rome was. Sure. And I think they're a bit more, they do some more interesting stuff with it, maybe because it's through this lens of Western historical tropes and fantasy tropes, but then through that Japanese lens, like you were saying earlier, that's really maybe what makes this so interesting. I know that there's even architectural references to Mesopotamia in this game. It's a really good YouTuber named Quaylog who does who I think has a background in art history, and she really talks about very explicitly this exact topic, like how they've drawn from these places and what they're doing with that. So
yeah. Another excellent YouTuber, I'm sure you know it, is a Tarnished Archaeologist. Very, very interesting videos that sort of blend real world history and lore in a way that I find really original, but it shows how easy it is to interpret these games in light of real world history without, these, as you were saying, Bill, without these necessarily being a straightforward reference. It's more like an oblique commentary on these historical periods and also on contemporary pop culture. All right, so here I got into a bit of trouble, but I think I'm okay. I will make my way through this area, if you guys don't mind, just to show you, because I think this is really, really spectacular visually, and maybe there's something more to be seen as I go along.
This is a real flex, by the way, because this is a late game area and it's a
Yeah.
area.
Yes.
And I know from experience, there's a difference between playing these games well and playing these games while talking and trying.
Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
What I'm also noticing is the aesthetics of like dramatization and the scope of it, and it reminds me. I think I saw this paper a couple of years ago on Dark Souls 3, I think, on the aesthetics of the sublime through like this Kantian lens about this overwhelmingly large, epic, spectacular, aesthetic that you can't really fully comprehend in a way, or
Absolutely.
and that the game seems to thrive on that as well. And I'm guessing the difficulty level also plays into that, because I'm sure if I played more than 30 minutes of this, the combat is as overwhelming, or if you approach a setting like this, you don't know where to begin. I imagine like there's there's also no Ubisoft style quest markers, I presume.
No. The only thing you get is here on the map, and that's actually something they added later. So in the original version, the release version, there were no markers at all for NPCs, whereas now I think you can track where the main NPCs are to be found. What was there from the beginning, of course, is this symbol, these rays here. So this guidance of grace, and it's basically telling you what rough direction you have to go in order to advance the main quest, if I understand it correctly. But of course, grace is also a very complex concept in the lore of the game, so it's not just a mechanic. Is something that speaks to the narrative setup of the game. So from what I remember, this Farum Azula, where we are, is also an interesting location from an archaeological perspective, because it is supposed to be outside of time. So here is, for example, where you find a very powerful dragon. I forget if I've already defeated the dragon in this playthrough, so we may not be able to get to that cutscene. But there's a very interesting cutscene when you get to that part of this Farum Azula area that essentially shows time going back, sort of the arrow of time changing direction, and you're taken back to the age of the dragons, which is a sort of mythical age in the timeline of Elden Ring. I'm not sure we can see that, but this is also, I was actually watching a video by Vati this morning on Farum Azula, Vati Vidya, obviously, who's a very well-known figure, maybe the major player in the sort of lore community for From Software games, and he has this reading of this region as an open-air mausoleum. You can see here a lot of archaeological remains, graves, tombs. It's all very stratified, which I think is something that is maybe true of the game as a whole. But I think it's particularly apparent here because of the very layered structure of this space we're exploring, which is partly in ruin, but still shows a lot of traces of some kind of life, I guess. But yeah, it really captures the eeriness of a lot of the game's locations that seem to be, point to a very distant past, but at the same time be still very fresh and sometimes painfully so, right? Anyway, I'm not sure where I'm really going here. I kind of lost my way. Maybe someone can help me. I was also trying to find item descriptions before, which is something we can always go back. Because, in terms of the item descriptions, I find it really interesting that, there's a lot of discussion about environmental storytelling in games, and the From Software approach to environmental storytelling is actually quite different from what we see in the typical, the BioShock mode of environmental storytelling, where we come across a recording or a video or something that is directly given in game space and that we can engage with. Here, the environmental storytelling, well, when it's not environmental in a strict sense, so when it's not really the environment sort of evoking a story, but if it relies on textual information, then we have to go through the menu essentially. So it's very we have to open the menu and select an item and bring up a long and mostly very cryptic description of the item that might or might not point to some important elements of the game's lore. So it's sort of very mediated, maybe more mediated than in a lot of games that use environmental storytelling strategically, because the text is not directly available, but we have to bring up the inventory and try to find what I'm trying to find right now. This seems to be a bit different here. So, Bill, do you remember how to bring up the item descriptions?
You have to. I played on it. It's going to be a different button, but there's a one of explanations is like that tells you about the different stats and things. It's square on the PlayStation controller, so it's going to be something like that.
Oh yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. So I think by chance this is actually a pretty important item in the plot of the game, which refers to this. Knight of the Black Knives, which is, I think, one of the defining moments in the history of the Elden Ring universe. Some kind of conspiracy against the gods. So here you can see, I mean, the lower part is, of course, mostly about game mechanics, but what you see right under the image of the knife is a hint of a story that willing players, let's say, of course, not everyone does this, maybe not a lot of people do this, but you can use this as a jumping off point for a very elaborate story about what happened on that night of the Black Knives and so on and so forth, right? And the same is true for essentially all of the items. Some have more interesting backstories, some are more generic, depending on the value of the items. Let me see. There's
one of the things that I think is one of the most interesting about this element is this way of storytelling, though, too, is, as you were mentioning, like the items descriptions, the story is so dispersed, unlike in, say, BioShock, right, where you're going through the story and it might not be perfectly linear, but generally there's a story there and the story is delivered to you, and the game makes it pretty easy to follow that story. FromSoft games tend to have no interest whatsoever in telling you their story. They expect you to dig for it, and so much so that it usually ends up being a community effort. So I think this is one of the things that I think makes it feel a bit more like real history, right? Trying to understand history, as we all know, it's not something you can just do easily, right? It takes the work of many people, many hours of labor and work, and also usually subjective leaps to connect up a narrative, right? That there's going to be disagreement about interpretations about the history.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that those kind of elements of these games lend themselves to that, and the story has to be parsed that way. You're supposed to play the game through the first time and get to the end and go, okay, what the hell just happened? And then play it again while we're watching all the VOD videos, and So I think that's the best way to play them. If you're playing with a friend. Or if you're the friend with somebody who's playing for the first time, don't give them too much of the story. Let them experience it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very atmospheric, so that's something that I write about in the book. Of course, you can work out, what happened at what point. At least you can do that to a certain extent. There's a law that is, I think, likely to remain ambiguous or open, even if you devote a lot of time and attention to the chronology. But it seems to be more than just the chronology. It's really about soaking in the type of affective atmosphere, and really there's a sense of the depth of the lore that seems to be independent from what do you actually know about the lore, which I find quite interesting. So a lot of players seem to value the detail, the nuance that goes into the world building, but don't necessarily have the time or even the interest to fully piece together what happened. So it's this sense that you could, if you wanted, you could piece it together, but mostly, unless you are really a lore expert, you don't do that. You just appreciate the amount of detail that goes into it. That was clearly, at least in part, created by the game designers in a very clever way, right?
So can I ask? So if you mentioned the item descriptions, and I mean, obviously not everyone is reading all of them, but imagine if you do a playthrough and you ignore all of those item descriptions, how much of the narrative remains, or like how much guidance do you have through the world?
I would say it is a quest story, a hero's journey type of story. So you will still get what you're supposed to do in a very general sense. There will be a direction to your experience of the game. So the basic cosmology, the basic forces at play in this universe, I think you can gauge and understand even without reading any of the item descriptions. It's if you're interested in the NPCs and how they're related to the grand narrative, if you want, of this world, that's when you should probably start paying attention to the item description. So that's where a lot of the gap filling happens, at least from my perspective. But also, it's quite clear that there are limits to the number of gaps you can actually reliably fill. But Bill is perfectly right to say that this is a communal effort. It's really community based, and that is something that, again, is designed. So it's like that by design, right? We're supposed to, at least if we care about the story, we're supposed to share our interpretations, our theories with other people, with other players, who then become part of our experience of the game world in an extended sense. What this does is it kind of blurs the boundary between in-game experience and the sort of discussions that arise around the game, and in a way that seems to be much more pronounced than in other games. Of course, it's like that for any type of lore community, right? But with these games, it seems to be that connection between in-game experience and out-game discussion or interpretation seems to be particularly strong. Okay, so maybe I'll move around. I wanted to show you some of the underground areas because they are, I think, quite impressive, but also quite interesting from an archaeological perspective.
Yeah, I think someone else in the chat, at the beginning we saw like the big tree thing in the middle.
Yeah, the Earth tree.
Someone compared it to Yggdrasil, so that's another like of those
absolutely
mythological references.
Somebody in the chat, the purple pens said, the lore coexists with people online posting dog at a turtle is what makes Elden Ring magical, and I agree with that so deeply. Like that's it reminded me of a paper I just assigned in class actually. There's a journal article by Florence Smith Nichols and Michael Cook that's about Elden Ring, actually looking at the Church of Ella, which was the church that we were looking at the very beginning, and trying to analyze it through an archaeological perspective, like trying to ask questions sort of like, can we map out space within a video game level? Super interesting, cool little article. But one of the things they were looking at was things like player messages and talking about how the player messages do simultaneously. I'm fascinated by the player messages because they have this coded language to them, right? Because they only give you have to pick from lists. You can't write whatever you want. You have to construct it out of a predetermined list, and people get very creative about the things you can say with that. But then also memes sort of emerge within it. So somewhere along the line, somebody thought it was funny to put a sign in front of a turtle that says dog, and now every turtle in the game has 5 dog messages around it. I don't know. That's just part of the game now.
Wow.
So it's this sort of what's it called, like asynchronous multiplayer
Yes.
experience.
Yeah, which is pretty central to this game. There is also, of course, synchronous multiplayer in the form of PvP or summoning other players. That's I don't know why I'm doing that. Just I guess reflex.
You're gonna have that Seal for a Well experience here.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, the game has both asynchronous and synchronous multiplayer, and again uses asynchronous interactions in a very strategic way to foster a sense of community, I would say. Okay, so here we're about to go underground. This is another of these structures. This is not in ruin, or not very, at least. But here, this is a scene that captured the imagination of a lot of first-time players of Elden Ring, where this is still fairly close to the starting area. And this is where you begin to realize how vast the game world really is. I don't know why I think
it takes a really long time to come up. I bet it's just still coming, which should give you a clue as to what's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of a sudden you realize that the game world is like 10 times the size of, or 50 times the size of what you thought it was going to be.
Here it comes.
Yeah, here it comes. And also extends underground. But speaking of these messages, so for example, these are some of the messages. There's also a blood stain, which shows how another player died here, which means you're probably not supposed to jump into this hole before the elevator comes. And again, another synchronous stay calm, another asynchronous, way in which these messages provide very helpful signposting for the community, which again creates a sense of belonging, right? Of camaraderie, of being part of a collective effort to beat this very tough game. So of course the difficulty of the game is also part of it. But anyway, you should pay attention to this scene, because we go down and this seems to never end, basically.
But I also wondered about the church at the beginning. So that's, as you said, Marco, like one of the very first thing you see, right? Once you start the game. So it reminds me of Breath of the Wild, and I think it's also like a church that is like a similar looking church, like at the very, very beginning. And it's interesting that both of these games are Japanese games, and that's like one of the first things that you see. So it might be like this icon of like medieval fantasy that Japanese designers might think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Japanese fantasy writers have always loved to use Christianity as a. We've got our Evangelions and such to reference.
Yeah. Anyway, here you can see some of the underground structures, and I think this is really impressive. And it goes on and on and on. Actually, I think the game has 2 or 3 underground cities that we can explore, depending on how you count them, maybe, but at least 2, and statues like this one, more or less everywhere. What does this say? Scarab ahead. So this is.
See that? Could this be a sorcery? That's telling you it's a scarab that drops a sorcery. If you know, you have to learn the language, which is quite cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could probably talk about player messages all day, because I think one of the fascinating things about player messages too is they are often friendly and helpful, and sometimes they're not. And so it's very common to find a little bit of environmental storytelling that's entirely player made, which will be like a cliff, and you'll find with a whole bunch of bloodstains around it, and a message right next to the cliff that says, "Try jumping, treasure ahead." And then right behind that will be 2 or 3 other messages that say, "Traitor ahead," or such, right? So and you can just put together this whole little narrative of an evil person.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's how you learn how never to trust anyone in these games, which is actually narratively and thematically a great message to get across.
So I'm not sure what we are supposed to make of the fact that maybe you guys can tell me. I'm not really an archaeologist in any meaningful way, but the underground structures are very well preserved, or fairly well preserved, compared to the overworld. And here, for example, I think this continues. Wait, let me see.
Yeah, look how big the underworld area is.
Yeah, I think this is. So this is a map of only the underworld areas, right? I think I've explored all of them. Maybe you can. Yeah, the Eternal City is another very impressive.
Yeah, all these cities underground are all a part of a single culture.
Yeah.
And they have and you notice the other two. This one does not, but the other two have false skies that make them look like there's a narrative reason why this one does not.
Exactly. Okay.
And this one I know is much more demolished than the other two. It is interesting because these underground cities were actually sort of destroyed in a cataclysm sometime in the past because of a lore reason. And they used to be very important, and they still are important, but they are like meant to be kind of cities of the past in a way that the things on the surface aren't.
Oh.
So it's interesting that they are kind of less destroyed than the surface.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's probably because these underground areas have not been as directly impacted by the War of the Shattering.
Possible, yeah.
So somebody mentioned before doing a run through of the story, and I think if anybody and you seemed uncomfortable doing that, if at some point during this you want me to try to do that.
Yeah,
I could do it, and I probably will get stuff wrong in ways that are funny, and I won't look at any notes or any guides. I'll just try and do it off the top of my dome, and that could be an interesting exercise.
Oh, absolutely! I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
I mean, if we could do it now, we were trying to fight off some of these guys.
We can give you some time to prepare. Also, I mean, we don't have to do it right away.
No, it'd be funnier if I don't prepare. If I just
to improvise. Yeah. Okay. Great. Go ahead. I'm very curious.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay. Let's think this through. Where does it start? Okay. So probably with the dragons, right? So you had already mentioned that there's a Fara Missoula is like a very ancient city from sometime in the very distant past, and at that time the world was sort of ruled by these huge eternal dragons made of a special kind of stone. Players of Dark Souls will recognize that as something similar, for reasons that are and during that time period, there's even an Elden Lord. That dragon that you can fight that you were mentioning was the very first, we think, Elden Lord, even though he's a dragon. Or he and she. I shouldn't say he. It has two heads, and those heads are different genders, so it's multiple genders at the same time. Anyway, there's a Vadi video has a whole video about dragons, which is kind of cool. And where am I going with this before I get myself lost?
Age of the Dragons.
So I haven't gotten anywhere. Holy cow! So there's these ancient dragons, and somewhere along the line, I guess before even the dragons, because one of them is an Elden Lord. There are these numerous entities in space. So this is where it gets kind of crazy, right? Because there's a kind of almost an eldritch theme here that are called. Well, they have different names, and they're essentially super gods or something, and they're out somewhere in the very distant, and they don't interact with the world directly, but they kind of choose envoys within the world to impact events, a little bit like how Greek gods do, right? That's they're obviously, I think, reminiscent of this, but they're mysterious. Their ways are very distant. They're not human-like really at all. The most important of these is an outer god, or whatever we want to call it, called the Outer Will, which at some point sort of comes to the lands between and designates Marika as a god, and bestows upon her the Elden Ring, which is this big ring that produces order for the world. And then Marika has to then select, for reasons that are not explained, an Elden Lord who's like a kind of like her boyfriend and protector. They do different things in different versions, but most of the time they end up being somebody that she has children with. She has a series of these Elden Lords. Godfrey and then Radigan are the two most important. And those two that become her consort, essentially like her husband. And they have children together. They have a bunch of children. And those children become the demigods who end up being the ones we actually interact with. That's most of the bosses from the game. And they all have names that sound really similar to each other and get very confusing. Renala and Ronnie and Radig. I already did Radigan. I don't know. I can't even remember them all. But whatever. They're all, a bunch of them have M's.
Radon is another one, yeah.
Yeah, Radon, and then they're
I think Bill, your audio is gone. I think you muted yourself
on Discord.
Yeah.
Oh, somehow I did that. All right, am I back?
You're back.
Yeah,
I don't know what I did. Well, that was you missed so much. No, I think I
were spilling all the cosmological secrets, and now you were censored.
Really, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. I'm sorry I volunteered to do this. I'm so sorry. Anyway, they have a whole bunch of kids. They become the demigods, and that's where it gets very Greco-Roman. Those folks are all much more human-like. They are in the world. They're messing with stuff. They're feuding with each other. They get into wars with one another, and they're most of the big bosses in the game. And somewhere along the line, this is where the black knife came in that we were looking at before.
Yeah.
One of these children, Ronnie, who's the sexy moon goddess that everybody loves, very memeable. She decides that she's going to mess with destined death. Marika, somewhere along the line, took a rune of death off the chessboard of cosmology, if you will, and that basically stopped everyone from dying, which is a mortal sin in FromSoft games usually, and it is here too, and it is in Buddhist thought and all kinds of stuff. Right, very interesting stuff to go on to there. And when she did that, that caused all kinds of chaos. Ronnie decides she's gonna take that rune. She hires these kind of people to go and they kill Godfrey, which one of the G's, the son of Marika, and that's the first demigod to ever die, and that causes everything to go to hell. That causes a huge war called the War of the Shattering between all the demigods. The Elden ring breaks, or Marika / Radigan breaks it, and the shards of it are fought over by all these demigod children, and that causes basically the apocalypse. And you wake up in the aftermath of that, and your goal is to collect as many of those shards of the ring as you can, gain a bunch of power, and become the new Elden Lord and restore order, like sort of repair the Elden Ring. And of course it's far more complicated than that. And like in all these games, like the sort of story you get just by playing the game is that one, but of course there's all kinds of levels and layers, and there's more complexities to that. The people who seem like good guys maybe aren't good guys. People who seem like bad guys maybe aren't bad guys. It gets kind of fun with that. I'm sure I missed so much. Don't at me. I'm sorry, but I think that's the big and it takes that long just to give the basics. So that was so hard. Oh God,
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, that was impressive. Really impressive.
So sorry.
Not at all. No. Something I wanted to add to that wonderful explanation is there are of course multiple endings. Depending on the NPCs you interact with in the course of your playthrough. So you can decide to confirm the greater will, to stick to the status quo, so to speak, or you can also try to break away from that and trigger a different type of ending, and therefore in some way transform the world of Elden Ring. It's still unclear, and that is something that Elden Ring has very much in common with Dark Souls games. It's still unclear to what extent those endings really change the setup of the universe. I mean, some of them are clearly different from the default ending. For example, there's an ending that starts a new age. I think it's called Age of the Moon. That's the Rani ending, if I remember correctly, which does seem to depart very, very clearly from the status quo. But then there are also shades of, the greater or the default ending. So yeah, it is fairly complex, and as always in these games, it is also kind of obscure until the very last minute. So it may be that you missed a step, you didn't talk to an NPC at the right time, and as a result, you're stuck with the default ending, or possibly you're also stuck with an ending you don't particularly like, but you don't know what to do to deviate from that, right? And of course, what you can do is you can go online, and there's all sorts of resources you can use to figure out how to trigger a specific ending. But if you're trying a blind playthrough, then it gets really, really tricky because the game doesn't explain anything effectively. And yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Wasn't there this quote from one of the developers about one of the earlier Dark Souls game that was it the first one? I don't know. Like was explored or reconstructed completely or something or finished completely by their players or something. That players had fully investigated the entirety of the game and reconstructed it completely. Is there a sense of how far people have gotten with this one, or is it the same? Obviously, I assume that since the first Dark Souls, the community has grown immensely, so that I guess such histories are created faster.
Yeah, I think from what I remember, there are still a lot of open questions about the world of Elden Ring, and a lot of people are pinning their hopes on the DLC that is coming out in June to settle some of those questions. And that's actually a pattern that you can observe in many From Software games, that the base games are extremely cryptic and don't explain anything, but then with the DLCs, some more information or explanation is provided. So a similar pattern might actually happen in this case. Here I wanted to show you another underground area, but this is more like a mini dungeon. So quite different from the expansive, vast underground cities I just showed. And there's a bunch of these. I think some of them are quite repetitive and maybe not super interesting. But this is the type of design that you find in earlier From Software games. So the kind of more focused level design with a lot of shortcuts and smaller spaces to explore. This is what you find in these dungeons, and not in this vast open world that we have.
Yeah, they did a really interesting job of mixing up a combination of taking advantage of that open world gameplay and still having these classically more designed encounter-based areas. Obviously, these little mini dungeons, but also like there are these kinds of pivotal moments of raised tension within the game, like Stormvale Castle, which is probably the first major area people, and that feels much more like a traditional FromSoft Dark Souls, Bloodborne area, and it's neat. It feels fun to jump back and forth between those. Farum Azula itself is, I guess, is kind of one of those areas. It feels
that's
like
true.
A traditional FromSoft area.
Oops. Sorry, I need to focus here a little bit.
Of course, I mean, absolutely. Wow, they have a troll.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're looking at the chat. I'm looking at the chat. Yeah, this is a crypt area. So I mentioned before, I think these areas tie back into Marika's removal of the Rune of Destined Death. In doing so, she didn't eliminate death from the world, but just changed it and allowed. Sort of new rights around death emerged, and so after that, people who died, who were kind of valued in society, kind of like in the way you'd be buried in like a churchyard close to the church, would be buried close to the roots of the Erd Tree, and so it's called Erd Tree Burial. But the removal or the stealing of the Rune of Death by Ronnie causes all kinds of chaos with that, which is kind of the reason why there's so many dead skeletons and things rising up from the dead. She's sort of screwed up that system, which is part of the reason, that death doesn't seem to stick as much as you might expect it to in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is one of the roots, right?
Yes, these are the actual roots themselves, and you see as you get close to them, there are sort of bodies that are being literally absorbed by the Erd Tree, and then I believe the leaves of the Erd Tree represent individual souls, and when the leaves fall, that's kind of a reincarnation sort of a thing, or it's I don't know. That's never stated explicitly, I don't think, but that's
I don't know. Was this supposed to be a boss encounter? I don't. Why are these guys here?
This is the boss. This is the some of the, like you said, some of these they're a little reminiscent of the Chalice dungeons from Bloodborne, and they get a bit repetitive.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
I think the difference being you don't do them all in a row, so it doesn't feel so bad. Exactly. But they do also have the problem of sometimes they have that the boss will just be a couple versions of tough enemies, or it'll be the same mini boss you've already fought 12 times with a slight reskin.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is clearly the case here. Maybe we can go to the round table hold. So that would be table of lost grace, I guess. So this is the hub of the game, where in this playthrough it's actually quite different from what it normally looks like, because I've already triggered an event that transforms this area very fundamentally, and I think most of the NPCs are gone. So this is where you talk to NPCs, do upgrades, things like that. So this is one of the few that there are left.
It's not normally on fire. That's
exactly. So this guy, the dung eater, I think.
The dung eater,
yeah. Yeah, so this guy is one of the NPCs that give access to a specific ending. I think what is mostly, almost universally considered the worst ending of the game. You can activate that by talking to that guy and by pursuing the quest linked to that guy. But yeah.
There's a couple of fairly straightforward, evil endings, for sure.
Yes.
That one is very obviously that. And then there is another one that's more mysterious, although even up to a point, because then if you do really pursue that, there comes a point where your sort of one companion and friend in the whole world repeatedly is like, do not do this. Please don't do this. I will abandon you if you do this. I will kill you if you do this. So even that, it's pretty clear that you maybe shouldn't be doing this, unless, of course, you want to get the platinum trophy like I did. Then you have to do it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this thing in front of me, I think that's the two fingers, which is another very important entity in the game world, and sort of I think a faction or something like that. So another key NPC. There's something more here. What is this?
Yeah, the two fingers are the emissary of the outer will.
All right.
And so they're supposed to allow you to commune with the outer will.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of the god of the gods in this world. Roderica is my favorite NPC. I love
Roderica. This is for crafting upgrades. But yeah, as you could see, the architecture here is very clearly Gothic, medieval sort of.
Yeah.
Okay, so where else can we go?
I love that FromSoft games themselves have now developed their own internal mythos. Like you just went by the crafting guy, the guy who helps you with your crafting.
Yeah.
That figure, that character, the sort of brawny hammer slamming I upgrade your weapons thing is a almost a trope within FromSoft games.
Absolutely,
That guy
yeah.
appears in every one of the games, and they're always a little bit different and a little bit the same. They feel like memories of each other in a way, which fits that. It's good ludo narrative harmony right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is really recognizable in terms of character types and even, of course, mechanics from Dark Souls games. So I wanted to show you something a bit more, let's say, urban. So this is the capital of this kingdom, Lanedale. Actually, not sure.
Yeah, Lanedale is also
wow.
up here. It's not going to be too much right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of where you are in the game.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's literally just the Colosseum. Just literally,
with towers on it.
Yeah, with weird little towers on it. So they don't get sued by big Colosseum.
By Italy, yes.
Okay, maybe I can go this way.
Big gladiator.
What I also wanted to ask is about so we talked about the item descriptions and how they give information about the world, but like in terms from like I guess a more literary studies perspective, like who is the narrator of these? Like are they like is it different characters throughout the world who wrote those texts, or who from who derived these descriptions? And also are there any like unreliable narrators? Like are there things that we shouldn't trust, or that thing that contradict each other from different, or give multiple perspective on the same event, for example?
Well, definitely in terms of characters, there are unreliable characters, maybe not in a narratological sense, but so there's this famous trickster figure, which is another figure that pops up essentially in all From Software games. I think it's Patches, very unreliable, very dodgy character we encounter, and who keeps getting us into trouble essentially. But on the level of the item descriptions, I think it's a great question. Who wrote them? Who is the narrator? I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. It is plausible that all of these descriptions originate from the same source, some kind of From Software narrator, we could call it. But who that person is remains unclear. And this is something that has been observed a few times in relation to Elden Ring, but also other From Software games, that there are some subtle contradictions in the item descriptions. So not all of them are fully consistent, or maybe they get the timeline wrong, or they mix up events. And I think the interesting question is, how did that originate? Is that something that happened because of a factual mistake in writing these texts? Is it a translation error, which is something that is often brought up by the community? The fact that the English translation is usually not a fully faithful translation of the Japanese original, and maybe some of those discrepancies crept in during the translation, or maybe, and of course that is the hypothesis that I find most interesting, at least from a conceptual perspective. Maybe the unreliability is actually designed for maybe something that is supposed to maybe, as Bill was saying before, right? So part of what makes these games so rich from a historical perspective is how we are naturally drawn to conflicting interpretations of the same events, and that is also something that gives a sense of depth to the game world. So maybe those slightly contradictory item descriptions are trying to give that sense of multiple readings, multiple interpretations of what is happening and what has happened in the past, especially. All right, so there's a golden rune I hadn't collected. Look at that.
Good one too. Yeah, I think they are. I think they do sometimes contradict, and I mean, maybe I'm being too generous, but I think that seems to really strongly really strongly support what feels like a theme of these games, which is time shifting, narratives shifting, power pushing certain narratives. Those are all themes and ideas that get explored in these games. Some of the earlier games, I think, not to mention Dark Souls 2 again, but I have a memory of some of the items descriptions in Dark Souls 2 seemingly having a narrator who might have even been an NPC in the game. There have been times when I think they're a bit more explicit about who that narrator is. I don't know. Elden Ring, they all are kind of written from something of an omniscient sounding third person perspective. And yet they do sometimes contradict, or they do sometimes only have part of the story, which is maybe more common. They don't give you as much information as maybe they could, and trying to parse what all that means.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is always a popular YouTube video too. Vadi video. He has a series in all the games where he has a friend who's a sort of lore person who's fluent in Japanese and English and looks at the like lost in translation, and it's always very interesting.
Yeah, and I think the unreliability of knowledge is a very big theme here. So as you were saying before, Alex, I think it's Daniel Vela, who talks about the ludic sublime in the first Dark Souls, because that article is actually quite old now, but
2015 I think, if I'm not mistaken, or 13, I don't know.
But it has to do with the sense of incomprehension. Of course, we can try to grasp what's happening. We can always try to impose an interpretation or a story, a chronology on these game worlds. But of course, there's also something that tends to escape us, and it's that residue. It's what is not narrativizable, at least not in any straightforward sense, that maybe keeps us on our toes, that keeps us returning to these game worlds, at least in a narrative sense, to try to make sense of them. So there's something a bit paradoxical about that too, I guess. How these games are, teasing us with the possibility of getting to a full-fledged story, a fully worked out story, but that never seems to happen, at least not entirely, and we're invited to narrativize even more, or in a different way, or go back to the community and start a new discussion on lore and theories and things like that. Anyway, so here you can see some of the very impressive walls of the capital. So this is obviously
the tree here.
The tree that we're very close to here.
Leyndell has a sort of a Roman vibe, I think, which makes a lot of sense, because Leyndell is the city of America, of the Golden Order, which is sort of her the kind of mainline fundamentalist group of the game, and they have a very imperial vibe. In fact, in the past, they're doing a lot of invading. They're doing a lot of taking over of the world. They're doing a lot of fighting with Raya Lucaria and groups in the areas that are nearby. So in a lot of that backstory. So that makes a lot of sense to me. That sort of implication of Romanesque architecture, to try and speak to that. I think that's what they're doing. I'm no Rome. You guys. Yeah. What do I know about Rome? About as much as I learned everything I know about Rome. I learned from Fallout New Vegas. So.
As we all do.
Oh,
exactly.
I know they wore football. They wore football gear. That was important.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah, so this is some kind of battlefield, and there's a number of them actually scattered throughout the lands between.
But it's interesting that we talk about Rome and Romanesque, but and here the ruins, but even in game set in the ancient world, you already have the motif of ruins popping up everywhere. Like there's no Assassin's Creed Odyssey without ruins of ancient Greece already in ancient Greece,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this such an ingrained motif in how we look at the ancient world that you can't really. I mean, I don't think I can name a single game on the top of my head which is in the ancient world without like already destroyed ruins in the ancient world or temples that
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Maybe Expeditions Rome, maybe that's one, but you don't really go into that many. Like it's really
Hades?
tough. Hades, but yeah, but that's like a more mythological
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
when
thing.
you're
And
also in the underworld, so everything's also kind of ruined.
yeah, actually, you end up ruining everything. Like you destroy
That's true.
the
Yeah.
buildings.
Yeah, I mean, in
So,
this game, they've sort of structured the whole story around destruction to make sure that everything's in ruins. Like a lot of these things, I think are supposed to have been ruined quite recently, not in
yeah.
antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
But they still look like ruins that you might find walking through an ancient place.
But like especially with Odyssey, I think, and David has talked about this before in presentations as well. Like there's no like you have to have some sense of pastness through that mode of ruination, or the way in which ancient history or what we know from ancient history contradicts with our contemporary ideas of it. Like this, the same thing happened with the painted sculptures in Odyssey, for example. Like that's something that we know from a fact is true from the ancient world, or is accurate to use the forbidden word, but that like audiences found very jarring when they actually ended up seeing it. So I guess with the ruins it's kind of the same. Not to say that there weren't ruins in the ancient world, but it's still a striking visual motif.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also to convey a sense of temporal depth. Oh my god, I'm getting hammered here.
Yeah, what is attacking you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind
there
of
were like some
ballista.
trebuchets.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
okay. The Colosseum towers thingies, or
That would be an interesting analysis. Would be looking at just all of the like siege weaponry in this game,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
often has a kind of a medieval-ish
Yeah.
vibe.
Mhm.
A lot of
Yeah.
ballistas, a lot of trebuchets, things like that.
Yeah, because like there's a term like in medieval study, there's this medievalism term for things like The Witcher, right? That are
Uh-huh.
sort of medieval-like, but not really actually medieval. I don't think there's like a term, like a similar term for ancient world stuff, like antiquity-ish.
Should be.
Or there should be like we can coin one right now if you want. But I don't know like if there's a similar. Because what we get here, and in a lot of other games as well, like there's this game that came out I think last year or the year before, like Asterigos, Curse of the Stars, like a game that sort of wants to be Horizon Zero Dawn but more ancient mythological, and what you get are kind of like these composite antiquities where you get like Greek and Roman stuff next to like Bill said Mesopotamian or maybe like some Japanese inspired stuff as well, and it all gives this idea of an ancient world without like it's a sort of simulacrum, I guess. Like it wants to pretend to be something ancient, but it isn't.
Yeah, I think that's what this game does. I'm really fascinated, sort of building off what Marco was just saying just a minute ago about giving the game a sense of temporality. I have this kind of. This is the creepiest part of the whole game, by the way. You gotta do this at night.
Yeah,
these guys are so creepy.
Yeah.
But they're like, to me,
Look at them.
they're
Sorry, yeah.
and they don't fight you. That's the creepiest thing.
Yeah.
FromSoft games, enemies that don't aggro automatically are the creepiest ones. They're way creepier.
False sense of security.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes them seem like insane, which they are.
They are, yeah.
What if happens if you attack them? They all start fighting, or
They will aggro, yeah.
Oh,
If you
okay.
attack one, the rest of them
There
will
you go.
aggro.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Then they all pull out like huge clubs and like scythes and stuff. It's great.
Nice.
But for this kind of, so like I said earlier, I'm teaching for the first time ever. I'm teaching a class that is about video games, like video games and archaeology and archaeogaming, and it's such a fun class to teach. It's so fun to talk to students about this. They're so much more like engaged than I ever would have dreamed they would be. And the challenge so far actually has been we come from very different generations of like gaming history. So like I want to talk about, I don't know, whatever, some game from the 90s, and they're all like, what the heck is that? They want to talk about Minecraft. Minecraft, and I've never played Minecraft or Fortnite or something. They don't want to talk about Fortnite. They're too. These are refined people. Okay, but like not very many of them have played Elden Ring, for instance. But it's just a phenomenal class, and I'm trying to work through this question of like what makes a game like this, a game like Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, feel so like it has a sense of verisimilitude, it has a sense of depth, and I really do think it has something to do with that. What you were just saying, this idea of like achieving a sense of temporality, of time depth, of having a history, its own history, not our history and applied onto it, that the game's own history. And there's a lot of different ways to accomplish that. I think Elden Ring does it extremely well with all the stuff we've been talking about, the environmental storytelling, ruination, the item descriptions, little snippets of history, the way NPCs sometimes don't know the whole story, and you have to kind of parse that, just like how people in real life don't have the whole story. Anyway, so
I don't know. Have you guys? I mean, very different game from this, but have you guys talked about Heaven's Vault?
Yeah, we streamed that a couple of years ago, and I was one of the guests then.
I find it really fascinating in that game how your choices as the player character get mapped onto this timeline, which also represents events in the very distant past of the universe. So you get the same chronology showing both your actions as a player during the very limited duration of your engagement with the game and events that happened eons before your arrival, right? So I think that is a very nice sign of that temporal depth that really visualizes almost the depth using this one spatial representation to accommodate both your playthrough and the distant past of the game world. Elden Ring doesn't do anything like that, but through these spatial elements visible in the game world, there is a sense of temporal depth for sure. And yeah, as we said, there are some ruins that clearly reflect a very, very remote past, and then there's the battlefield that is clearly not as remote, not as distant in time, or pointing to a battle that took place much more recently in the game's chronology. So the game world becomes a sort of a map of its own temporal evolution.
So I wonder about that element of like temporal distance and the player's involvement in like metaphorically digging up the history of the world and then like doing this archaeology. How much of that is like specific or relatively unique to the video game medium? Like I imagine if this was adapted into a TV show or like a movie, you would lose all of that or most of that, I guess, like background lore. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be the same, and you wouldn't feel so involved in reconstructing that. So maybe this is like as Bill said, like intersection of archaeology and video games, but maybe video games can be like accommodate such types of actions and narrative or storytelling more than other medium.
I guess the closest element comparable with that in movies and series is the phenomenon of fanfics. But fanfics is not really like trying to interpret more deeply the very content, but creating new content stemming from it. So it's not quite comparable.
It's also digital communities in that respect.
Yeah. I was wondering, listening to you guys and absorbing all this wisdom, that it's quite interesting that probably one ironic reason for this vast historical complexity, or the sense of this vast historical complexity, is the brilliant move of the game developers here of being scarce or being greedy with information. Because is this phenomenon of making the reader, the viewer, or the gamer, creating it from the empty gaps, what is creating or generating this phenomenon that you have been talking about all through, the YouTubers, the people interpreting, creating different theories and so on. It's quite a dynamic that resembles somehow the very historical and archaeological investigation, because a lot of theories and a lot of lines of thought are creating precisely because there is nothing solid and close.
Yeah.
So probably all that vast content and that vast creation is also accumulating a sense of complexity because it's there, and also because players are creating it by the vast amount of channels and of interpretations and storylines that are not there, and people is filling it with the gaps. It reminds me a little bit what happened with Red Dead Redemption 2. There were so many environmental, especially realia, that was never explained, that a lot of interpretation and theories were created, and that gave the game, which is basically not supposed to be historically deep, an enormous sense of complexity, just because a lot of things were complexified by the gamers, the players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. But look at this. There's a lot of minor mysteries in this game. You don't know what these hooded creatures are doing. You don't know. I mean, I'm sure a better lore hunter would know what they are called, but still, as you play, you encounter all of these scenes that are so mysterious. That almost invite, as you were saying, David, really invite a creative type of engagement on the part of players, and that's where the boundary between the distinction between experience and fan fiction almost gets blurred, right? Because we're encouraged to go online and share theories that are almost mini narratives about the game. So yeah, there is an openness to this game world that is quite unique, I would say, and that's part of what makes these stories so compelling, because of the many gaps that they contain, but also their ability to because something that is too gappy, that is too vague, can also have the opposite effect of creating disengagement, right? So here I think they're walking a very fine line between providing just enough information to trigger a narrative response, without, of course, providing the answers. So it's very sophisticated. The gaps are here placed very strategically, I would say. But yeah.
And about this aesthetical melting pot that you were talking about before, with the Roman style and ancient style, I was wondering if we should also take into consideration the strike and the impact of tourism as a cultural phenomenon to generate this vast common ground. For most of the world, actually. Marco was mentioning before the Oriental filter in the perception of Western culture. And at the end of the day, if we take into account the phenomenon of tourism as a creator of aesthetical common places, churches and the places that everyone visits, like Pisa or the Colosseum or so on, become the essential aesthetical references. So creating anything that is working on that visuality is going to appeal to most of the world, because there are way more tourists than researchers. So that aesthetic is going to appeal to everyone, because somehow, some way or the other, everyone has seen ruin much more than that hole on the ground that is a real excavation.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, it's maybe not a coincidence that one of the most recognizable buildings, real world references in Elden Ring is, as I showed before, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? Which is an iconic kind of tourist destination and hotspot. So it is quite interesting, and I'm sure it played a big role in shaping the artwork, the design of the visual design of these environments. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here. I wanted to show you this frozen area. It's maybe not as interesting as some of the other areas from an archaeological perspective, but again, there's a lot of diversity in terms of environments too, which is maybe not too surprising for this type of open world game. But here, I would say it feels, despite its diversity, visual in terms of biomes, it feels a bit more coherent than in other games where, when you go from one biome to another, you can really tell that, this is where the new area begins, and it's very obvious. It's not very well realized, whereas here it's all very gradual. Partly also because of the vastness of this open world.
So
But
I
yeah.
guess this place was called Mountaintops of the Giants, I think I saw.
Yeah.
So giants and snow, and I see like some tundra-like environment. So I guess this is more like Scandinavian or like
Absolutely,
Nordic
yeah,
mythology,
Nordic, yeah,
coded.
definitely.
Um,
And one of the bosses you fight here is a fire giant.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's a clear reference there to Nordic mythology.
That's interesting.
Whereas here, I mean, this is Khalid, I think. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure, but the feel of this area is completely different, as you'll see. This is more of a hellish kind of. Oh no, I ended up in a dungeon, but definitely a very different type of environment here. So,
Aeonia,
I mean, of course, the swamps.
Yeah.
Swamps are another recurring landscape and from software games, and mostly despised by a lot of players because they, if only these games were not difficult already, this typically adds some poison mechanic, like in this case.
I mean, just turn on story mode, right, and that solves it, I guess. But
yeah, I guess that's the way. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is where you fight a boss. Oh yeah, Scarlet. There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Very interesting. Kind of organic architecture.
Yeah, true.
I mean, not architecture, but spatial design here.
Yeah. So where is this boss? Or
I think the boss is
already
gone because I've already beaten
okay,
the boss.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's in the area.
Yeah. The bosses do not respawn. Thank God.
Luckily. Oh wait, Bill says his mic has stopped working. Oh.
Oh, again. Okay.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, so let's check out another church. I don't know if you guys would like to see something in particular, or this is another church, and this I think plays a big role if you want to. Oh yeah, you can offer Dragon Heart to buff your character in specific ways. Oh no, these are actually dragon incantations. So for certain types of build, you can use this as a very powerful spell. But I've never really done that.
How about now? Can you guys hear that?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
All right, so now I'm just on. I'm probably not as good a sound quality, but at least I've got. This is a different, like my internal microphone at least is working. Very strange. Having some weird technical glitches today. Thanks for rolling with me.
Okay. Audio quality is great, by the way. So
oh, it's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. I lost my outbound mic, and so we're going internal Mac speaker.
So this is another fragment of the Elden Ring. You can see right ahead, embedded into the rock. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I somehow, when I did my little run through the game, didn't mention the enormous tree that takes up like 2/3 of all the skylines. The Erd tree. The Erd tree is connected to America in the Outer Will and the Elden Ring, and it's the place where America basically hangs out and lives. It's also right in the middle of Leyendell, that big capital city that we were in earlier. So it's obviously they did some interesting things. We were talking before about ludic play and the unique ways that this game can kind of do that. Open world games have this interesting challenge, right, of guiding you through the world, and right, some games don't do that very well. They just give you quest markers and you got to follow. This game has no quest markers at all, but does have an enormous open world, and so it uses architecture and things within the world to guide you along.
Absolutely.
I think about as well as the recent Zelda games do, and that's quite an achievement. And the Erd tree is incredibly important, and therefore it's incredibly enormous, and it's and the whole game you're sort of making your way towards it until you then go beyond it. Because of course this game has like a false ending where you think you're about to beat the game, and then they go, no, there's like 40 more hours.
Really? Wow. Okay.
40. Whoa.
Yeah.
Maybe. It depends on how much kind of the late game side content you choose to do.
So this is where the final battle takes place.
Just go do it. Just do the final boss while we're talking.
I don't think I can.
That would be a baller. That would be very impressive.
I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure where I am in the game.
You're definitely can do it right now. If that doorway's there, you should be able to just go.
But why is the door not there? That's what I am trying to figure out. Because I cannot.
It's not letting you interact with it?
No. I think I have to do something before I can go through the mist.
Because you've already beaten the sort of the second to last boss.
Yeah, that's true. But see,
it should give you when you walk up to that gate there, you should get a trigger.
There's no prompt. No.
Oh, that's weird. Are you in like multiplayer mode or something? You've got somebody invaded you.
I don't know.
Chad, help us out here. What are we going? What's the problem?
Yeah, this is a playthrough I started and never really finished, as far as I remember. But we're talking about 2 years ago.
Did you already beat? Are you already in the post? Have you already beaten it? Like, can you go to next new game plus if you sit down at a grace?
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe I've already beaten it. Let me see.
That's the only thing I can think of.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think there's something that has to happen before.
You do. No, you do. Do you have to have at least one? You have to have at least one ending lined up, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, maybe there's something I have to do, like on the Halleck tree. Is that possible?
No, you don't have to. The Halleck tree is like entirely
okay.
there at all.
All right. And I've already been there clearly, so.
Yeah, you've done all of that.
I don't know.
You're holding the boss weapon of the Halleck tree in your hand there. So.
Oh yeah.
It's just showing off.
Yeah, just showing off.
That's just the boss weapon of the hardest boss in the whole game.
I don't know. Maybe I've already beaten it then.
One hit death run. Let's go. Just start the game over and play till you die. I like that.
Maybe another time.
What is it? One of the.
Well, yeah.
I don't know. We'll figure it out. Oh, I remember. I was gonna pop in there when I was accidentally muted before. I was like super fascinated by that conversation about. Alex, you asked like what's special about this as a game and how it does its narrative. And I just was thinking about something that Marco said way earlier in the conversation about, you have a choice. It is kind of a ludic choice, right? It's a gameplay choice to go in and like read those item descriptions, or whether you want to follow the NPC quest lines. You can just ignore them, not do them. You don't have to. You can just you can do them halfway and then just stop, right? The active medium means that how much you want to explore those mysteries is left up to you. There's also, of course, that meta-narrative stuff we've been talking about the whole time, wikis and YouTube videos and all that stuff. But that exists, of course, I remember like a few months ago, I was watching like The Green Knight, phenomenally good movie. And with similarly, right, lots of vibes, lots of moods, excuse me. Not a lot of clarity in its narrative, and it was really fun after that to go and like watch some YouTube videos of people talking about the history, the history of English folklore and of the Green Knight and of the Knights of the Round Table and all of that, and learning about it. That felt very similar to the kind of experience you might have with a FromSoft game, but the movie is passive. It shows me what it shows me. In the game, I have some control over that. I can choose to never read any of the item descriptions. I can choose not to. So there's what you guys were talking about before about you put that power in the player's hands to decide how much, and it allows the mystery to be sort of variable. You can really just play the game and intentionally let it just be pure mystery, or you can go wild and meticulously make a huge one of those, boards with the red string on it, with the trying to reconstruct the story of all the different characters. Oh yeah, my camera got a little bit screwed up when I was trying to get my mic fixed, so I apologize for that. Let's see if I can get that right.
I thought you fell or something.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like the wire is getting tugged. I look like, this is very cyberpunk. This background I've got makes a lot of sense. I got wires going everywhere. I'm plugged into stuff. I got like a digital IV in here. You guys wouldn't believe how cyberpunk I am.
All right.
I don't know why it won't let you go to the ending. I'm still that's the greatest mystery of all.
And of course, the game doesn't really allow you to track. It doesn't track where you are with respect to the store, so it's something you have to infer from the locations you've explored. But yeah,
so, does this game have like many games like does Pentiment have it? I don't know. Like this what's the word? Like Chronicle or something that fills up as you progress. Like it gets.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, go into your items though. Go to inventory.
Yeah.
And go to your key items. I'm wondering if you go over to literal keys.
Yeah.
So not those ones, but yeah, they're it's further to the left. It's actually before all the equipment. Where is that?
This one, huh?
More. There it is. Yeah, go down a few notches.
And
you've done all the down past where we can see. Let's see. I want to see if you've got a little bit further. Yeah. So all right. So you've got those the rings there. Oh, we went too far.
Oh, wait.
This is hard to see because there's the rings with the little lines in the middle of them.
Oh yeah.
Right there. Yeah. Those are your. No, those are 2 great runes. I'm just wondering if. Okay. I guess I'm not seeing them. If you've actually got an ending queued up. Because you need to get a rune, right? You need to get at least one.
Yeah, I think
not the great runes, but
okay.
No, but there's like the runes, like when you finish the Dung Eater's quest line, or you finish the Gold Mask quest line, they give you like a rune, and that's the thing that actually triggers the ending. And it looks like you don't have any of those. And I'm wondering, do you need to actually get one of those before you can end the game? I've never done that. I've never gotten to the ending without one of those in my possession. You have to go finish one of those quest lines.
Okay, but how do you get them? So
depends on which ones you were pursuing.
Yeah, I see. Yeah,
you might be able to do, if you were doing Gold Mass, he's kind of near you.
Okay.
There's Fia the Deathbed Companion. She would be in the underworld. She's at the end of her quest line. If you go, it's like L3 or whatever to go show underground R trigger. We're gonna figure this out live.
This is digital community at work, right? This is
if you hit your right trigger, it'll take you to the underground map. Like the Benny, you gotta go. Oh, you're in there. Oh, I keep looking at the wrong screen, and I'm looking at the like slightly. And in the top one, the most northernmost one.
Yeah.
Which one of those map icons? One of those is across the. Oh, yeah. So you haven't done all of that area. That big open area that looks like a boss zone at the bottom is a boss zone, and that's where you finish Fia's quest line. I think that's what it is. I think you have to complete like one of the NPC quests that gives you an ending.
Yeah.
In order to do an ending.
Makes sense.
You could do Ronnie's still. It looked to me like you were probably most of the way through Ronnie's based on the items you had.
I don't know if Ronnie's still here though.
Yeah, she might already be.
Yeah, I don't know.
She would be in Ronnie's chamber, or she might be already. You have the doll already, so she might already be like in the underground.
Okay.
We're gonna need a Fex for life. Yeah, she's not there, so. Because you have that little doll in your inventory that looks like her. That's an item from the very end of her quest line.
Yeah.
I want to Google this. Is this? I didn't know that was true. Can you finish Elden Ring? We're doing this live, exactly what we've been talking about, without a rune.
Another gap filled.
Without an end game rune. I don't know what to call these things. Jeez, can you finish the game without activating, equipping any great runes? No, that's not what I'm looking for. Without finishing an NPC quest.
I feel like I'm already in the end game, though.
Yeah.
I don't know, because all the ash, all these red particles.
Yeah, you're literally at the final boss battle. That's like that. You should be able to just walk in there, and I think there is no standard ending in this game. Okay. There are only, you have to get an item from one of the NPC quest lines in order to get an ending. So I think you might. I've never done that. I've never gotten to the end of the game and not had at least one of those. So you have to finish off. There's 5 different endings. You got to finish off one of those, basically.
Okay.
I think that's my theory. It's my working theory. Weirdly, I can't.
Let me try this again. Let me try this again. Maybe I can go through.
It's so strange.
It is.
It's fun.
No, I cannot.
Yeah, it should give you a prompt like a go through the.
Yeah, I know, of course. Yeah. Huh. But you're saying if I had already beaten the game here, I would.
If you had already beaten the game, it would. Yeah, it would kick you. That's possible. Do you have to be? Here's my second theory. If you go back to the round table hold and go to the table there, you might have to be there.
Oh yeah,
to trigger a new game plus.
Yeah.
So that's possible too. Could be that.
Let me check.
There we go. Moment of truth.
Begin
yes, we figured it out. We did it. Hey.
Okay. It's this one.
We should say that's. I actually think that's one of the really fun parts of these games. Like everybody's first FromSoft game, usually you play with like a text chain going with like 1 or 2 of your friends who are like really into the games in an annoying way. They have been actively playing them for years. And specifically you just ask them like, should I put points in Dex? What's Dex? And like then they just explain it to you obnoxiously. That's part of the experience. It's really part of the experience.
Oh, this is a new function, by the way. Enter combat, Colosseum combat. I've never seen this. Yeah.
You can do that from the round table hole?
I don't know. Yeah.
There is the Coliseum that you can see near Lane-Dell is a PvP
arena
zone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, wasn't.
But that's something they added.
Wasn't that like
later?
A DLC after? Yeah, I think I remember that.
It was added afterwards.
I think so. Yeah.
And interestingly, I think from every FromSoft game, they always make a real developer developed place where you're supposed to do PvP fights, and everyone ignores it and just continues fighting in the places that organically emerged during the months when the game is released. Right. And I'm pretty sure that's true with this too. Like it's like shameful to actually fight in the Coliseum. Just go fight out on a field somewhere.
Okay, I didn't know it was actually called Coliseum in the game itself. Like it wasn't just a reference we made. Okay.
No, yeah.
But I remember seeing a news article or something a couple months after it was released that they had a Coliseum PvP thing.
Yeah, for some reason they almost always release that as an after game patch. They did that with the last couple of games too.
Maybe they want to have people level up first before they.
Possible, yeah.
Yeah, probably something like that. That makes some sense.
Or to keep engagement going for longer.
Yeah, because a PvP meta always sort of emerges with time and what's the agreed upon level that you should be at and builds that are good, and they're constantly going in and nerfing. That's another thing that makes games quite different is generally authors don't have to nerf their books That's not something they attempt to.
That's true.
I've gone back and I've removed 3 pages out of chapter 4 because it was too overpowered and it was really throwing off the meta.
All right.
That's another thing that we haven't really talked about. It's the fact that this was co-written by George R. R. Martin.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think someone in the chat said, while Bill was giving the history, that some of the characters' names, like their initials, spell the initials of George R. R. Martin or something.
Yeah, all the demigods with their R, there's like all named R, and they're all named M. They all have these names, and G. Yeah, they all have names that start with G, R, or M. And that's been the theory.
That's
interesting.
Yeah.
I saw in an interview with George R. R. Martin, because there's a lot of people were asking that, how much role did he really play in the writing, and he apparently said in like a late night interview that what Miyazaki asked him to do was essentially to like write the history of 5,000 years ago. So he kind of came up with the ideas for the big cosmological questions, and then they took that and ran with it to create the actual story, which is very interesting. So that might mean that a lot of these things we've been talking about might actually be coming from Martin as opposed to from the Japanese developers.
Yeah, at the same time, there's so much that this game has in common with previous From Software games that I sometimes wonder, to what extent he was actually involved in the final product. Probably not much. I mean, I'm sure he provided some of the basic coordinates of the lore and of the universe, but I think they did something very From Software with what he wrote.
Yeah, it might also have been a promotional thing.
Yeah, I think that was part of it.
Sounds like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so anything else you would like to see before we wrap up?
Have you shown everybody? Have you ever shown everybody the Academy of Raya Lucaria?
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
That's an interesting bit of architecture. It's kind of down, and it's on the left hand side there in the middle of the lake.
Wait, is it this one, right?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's like a tiny little picture. I think so. I think it's that little grouping. That's the Academy.
Cool.
That's got very interesting, very different architecture from a lot of the rest of the game.
And again, this is a bit of a From Software trope. There's always, in these games, there's always an archive or a library that we visit. So this is one of the bosses that then turns into an NPC that allows you to respec, if I remember correctly. Very interesting boss battles. Boss battle, I mean, in 2 phases here. Also kind of annoying, but I guess they all are.
It's a gimmicky fight.
Yeah,
they always have a few fights that are kind of gimmicky.
Especially the first phase, yeah. Okay, so... how do I... Wait.
Yeah, there's that little elevator there that takes you back to sort of the main area.
So is there, because most of the architecture we've seen is sort of Gothic, Romanesque, ancient, medievalist. Are there like Japanese type buildings as well?
No, not really.
Very little.
What there is, of course, so here I'm obviously using a katana. So there are some subtle references to Japanese style and culture, but never on the level of architecture, I would say.
That's interesting because there's this idea of externality as well, that in order to build a compelling world, you need to build a world that is different from the one you live in yourself. Like a theme park about, in our case, Belgium wouldn't work in Belgium itself. Like it only works somewhere else. And so maybe that's also part of
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There's definitely a fascination with European and Western culture.
It's almost always the case in these games that there is a Japanese-like culture somewhere else in the world, which is their excuse for putting katanas and usually an armor set or two that looks like a samurai outfit, and that is true in this game as well. And they tend to be relatively minor lorelets and not super well developed.
and that ties into that idea of like composite antiquities again, I guess.
For sure. I'm just trying
in this
to
game, it's,
get out of
they're
here.
they're often specifically even to the east, and I think that's true in this game too. They're called like the Eastern Reeds or something like that. But then they went and made Sekiro, which is a game that's just straight up takes place literally in Japan
absolutely.
and is
Yeah,
about
fair enough.
Japanese
Yeah.
history and Japanese cosmology, and that's really cool. So
Yeah.
they put it all in one game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since they're not
Big copy.
Ubisoft, they don't copy paste it into every single thing they make. So they
No, though
No.
they do reuse assets, and that is very interesting because there have been a couple of times when people in the community have gotten really focused on, oh, there's this frieze on this wall in Fara Missoula, and it proves that this type of people lived here, and then somebody will point out like, oh, that's a reused asset from Bloodborne, and then
Nice.
you have to have this whole argument with yourself about. Does that mean it's actually not meaningful, or would they have been just as careful in how they reused assets? I think they probably would to try and make sure they still fit the story. But
I think that's where the quest for archaeology and the past conflicts with game design feasibility and
Yeah.
budget limits.
Yeah, but it's interesting how the community can always, recuperate those reused, recycled assets, and turn them into integral part of a lore theory, right? So, in a sense, it's always possible to reclaim these elements.
So, like with the communities who make these histories and these chronicles, does it go further than like YouTube channels and wiki pages, or do they actually like compile like books on the history of this world of Dark Souls worlds, for example?
There are a couple of books, I think. I'm not sure they are narratives. They're more like encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Like for Dark Souls, there's this text called "You Died," I think. That does that. I don't know if these are really, full-fledged stories. They're more like explorations of lore and the backstory of particular characters and things like that. So this Rhea Lucaria, I don't know
think
why.
the developers are often quite close to the chest. I think they definitely like the idea of letting the community do as much work as possible because they usually even in external documents they usually are quite cagey and they're careful never to give the whole story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It does often make me wonder, and I'm sure other people too, like how much is just chance, right? How many things really are practical decisions of game design or just trying to make a level look good or work well for a boss or and players, we've now come to expect that these are all very thoughtful decisions, and so we find a way to make them work within that framework. How much of that, and does that matter? I mean, kind of who cares, right? It's the death of the author or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Just trying to show you more of Rhea Lucaria, but I'm kind of getting lost here.
Oh, wow, what's that? The turning wheel?
Yeah, it's like a turning wheel.
Yeah, look at this. Is this thing interesting? I don't know. What part of history are we looking at with Riley?
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a bit different. It's
It is.
Baroque, maybe, or something.
Yeah, that's true. Oops.
You can ride this thing down to.
Oh,
Oh, wow. You're lucky for that light.
No, you actually. Yeah, you can get back on it too and ride it down.
It does look.
Did I write it down?
Baroque, yeah.
Yeah, if you go back to where you just came off of it, and you basically jump on the back of one of the little spokes that you just rode over, it goes down.
Does it take me all the way down?
Oh yeah, there's a whole area down here.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a whole another. There's actually two areas because there's a place you'll be able to get off.
Maybe
instead
a
of the main point.
graveyard or something like that. Is it possible?
There is, yeah. There's an area at the midpoint, and then there'll be another area.
Oh.
Oh, you might still be okay.
Wow.
Oh, that was slick.
Okay.
That was very slick.
Okay, now do I just jump? Yeah, I guess I can just.
Well,
Yeah, it'll just drop you at the bottom.
Oh, look, I've never been here.
Oh,
Oh no!
what?
This is annoying.
You know, there's a secret with these guys, a fun secret. If you let one of them kill you with the move where they sort of eat you and shove you into themselves, because they're supposed to be these like medieval torture device looking things, it teleports you to an entirely different part of the world.
Really?
Oh yeah, Volcano Manor. Is that possible?
Yes,
Yeah.
Patches tells you about it in his quest line.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is just wildness, right? Come on. And it's actually a way of kind of like breaking the game. You can skip like a huge portion of the game by doing that.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe if speedrunners use that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, this looks more like the architecture looks more baroque, but the nature is more like fairy tale like, I think. Like
Yeah, that's true. These crystals.
Yeah, the crystal, like it's more. Yeah.
Yeah, the crystals are important. They're an important part of the lore. Raya Lucaria is all about magic, the school of magic, which is tied to the intelligence stat. And these crystals are from outer space. They're basically like from meteors, and they're where all intelligence-based magic derives from. Are these crystals? Like if you look at the stabs that you equip to cast intelligence-based spells, they all have these little crystals in them, and things like that. So,
yeah, and actually, Volcano Manor is an area we haven't seen yet, so maybe that's where I'll head next.
And that's again very different kind of architecture. Yeah, it's over all the way on the left there. Yeah.
Rykar, yeah, Volcano Manor.
Yeah, that's the boss. Yeah, that'll take you to kind of the main area.
Okay.
This is also feels more baroque or more modern.
Yeah.
Than
Yeah, like neoclassical almost.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that it's neoclassical in a world where we also have classical architecture has interesting, interesting possibilities. Is this a neo version of the other architecture we see in the games? I don't know enough about the lore of Volcano Manor.
Also, the fact that it's mostly white marble and it's not painted, or
Yep,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, there's all kinds of statues that would definitely be painted in the real world, but they're white in this game, and that's really tying into some of the stuff you guys were talking about earlier. They also use paintings a lot in this game, and it would be very interesting, I think, to look at the paintings and the styles of the paintings.
Absolutely. You can collect them, right? There's you can.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a very weird,
whole-
it feels slightly half-baked quest line kind of thing where you can find paintings, and then you look. They're all landscapes, and then you find that place in the landscape, and there's like secret items.
Exactly, that's what it is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow, this is
So
more
some kind of hellscape.
Yeah.
This is giving me more like Hellblade vibes from last week.
Yeah.
It's Celtic, like with the.
Yeah.
Or at least what popular culture thinks what Celtic would look like.
FromSoft games are always like at least partially horror games. There's always horror elements.
Yeah.
And this is an area that definitely leans more into that.
I hate these guys.
The arrows.
Especially the arrow ones. Yeah. They shoot like 97 arrows at you. Earlier in the game, you could just get bodied by one shot of those.
Oh yeah. Sure.
I think that's why I stopped.
Well.
And I'm trying to think of the lore implications of those guys being here, because they're associated with the Raya Lucaria area. Interesting. Because all that's meaningful. If there's like an enemy type that repeats in a new place, that means something. There's a reason for that connection. Always.
Oh, wow.
It's always thoughtful.
What is hanging there? Is it the dead? Like is it?
Yeah, they're the
bodies.
Giant or something.
They're those giant guys. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and these footsteps, what are they? I think there is an enemy that I could kill
Yeah,
here,
that's
right? Yeah.
no, it's one of those little it's one of those scarabs. That
Oh,
if you
okay.
kill it, it will drop some kind like a spell or
I
something.
never understood how to
Yeah,
approach these.
you have to kind of find the path. Again, there's often
Okay.
messages that will give you advice on good places to stand.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find messages that'll just say like, "Try here,"
Yeah.
and
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the
because
last.
it goes in a pattern. They go in a circular pattern. You just have to find a spot in that pattern, wait for them. They're kind of annoying, but
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you can.
now we're just doing gameplay demos. We're just telling people how to play the game. This is just, come for the gameplay for the archaeological analysis. Stay for the tips and tricks.
Absolutely.
Elden Ring 101. All right, but I see we're
All
almost
right.
at the 2 hour mark, and
wow.
yeah, it's really flown by.
Yeah.
I think.
Wow.
This is a lot of fun, though.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you, and Bill, you too
Incredible.
for joining. This is something we've never done before. Oh, and thank you, Fub Archaeologist, for the subscription just now.
Oh, wow.
This is something we've never done before. And this is the first of a series of specials that we'll be doing on like these archaeological mechanics and gameplay elements in games. We have another one planned on what is it, March 29, I think, like in 3 weeks, where we'll be playing The Last of Us Part 2. With Lexi Henning from the Ozymandias project and podcast. So we'll be looking at some of the lore text there as well, or I mean lore text, history text, I guess, background stories there as well, and try not to get killed by zombies. But yeah, in between now and then we'll be continuing and finishing Hellblade on the usual programming. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, chat, for being so lively and for being great. Thank you, David, for being here. Thank you, Marco and Bill, again, for joining and giving all of us your expert thoughts and insight on all of this. I put the link to Marco's book in the chat a couple of times throughout this.
Thank you.
There's you can also find Bill's Twitter handle on the screen. So yeah, have a nice afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is where you are, and weekend, and hope to see you soon in the next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.